Welcome to 10-5, the official podcast of the OPP Association. I'm your co-host, Scott Mills.
And I'm Emily Brown. For those of you tuning in for the first time, the OPP Association represents nearly 10,000 members of the Ontario Provincial Police in Canada. Our members are central to everything we do and are our greatest strength, and we are committed to keeping both our members and the public informed about important issues affecting policing in the province of Ontario.
Thanks for that, Emily. And this week we've got a very special guest. Lance Valcour is a retired inspector with the Ottawa Police Service. And Lance has been busy writing a book in collaboration with his wife. And the book is titled, If They Only Knew, A Cop's Journey with Addiction and Mental Health.
And in addition to Lance's current book, he's actually already working on a second one, tentatively titled, What's Next? A little bit of background. Lance retired from the Ottawa Police Service in 2010 after 33 years of service. Lance is an author, independent consultant, strategic advisor, marketing technologist, digital evangelist, coach, internationally recognized keynote speaker, and facilitator on a wide range of public safety issues, including information management, information and communications technology, interoperability, and business development. And Lance has been married to Lise, whose strength and courage inspired this book. He has 3 sons and 3 grandsons and is talking to us today from his home in Kemptville. Lance, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks very much for having me.
Well, before we dive into your book, Lance, I've known you for some time. I've watched you from afar, especially on the interoperability files. And if people don't know what that is, that's basically police radios. Lance is very knowledgeable on that aspect of things. And I was just wondering, Lance, if you could give us a brief overview about yourself and your career, and especially any nexus to our members here in the OPP Association, because our primary audience is our membership here, and I know you've done a lot of work with the OPP, so I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thanks very much, Scott, and I've known you again for many years. You were are my mentor on a wide range of topics around social media. So thank you for all your help and assistance and guidance over the years on that. Regarding just quickly on the interoperability front, essentially what it's really all about is trying to get the right information to the right people at the right time, whether that's police, fire, paramedics, emergency management. So that's kind of the area that I've been working on for many, many years. Regarding my background, I grew up in a small village of Iroquois. I actually was born in Kemptville, where I live again today, but moved to Iroquois when I was about 10 and had a lot of interactions with OPP members. I was the local carryout boy at the grocery store. I was a lifeguard. I was a referee and eventually referee in chief. So we had lots of interactions with the OPP. They would come down to the beach, small village. We could look across the river and see United States, and the OPP officers would drop down and say hello, and the rules were all different back then. So they actually, a number of them took me on ride-alongs when I was about 16, 17. You couldn't probably do that today, but that's the kind of thing that got me very interested in a career in policing. And I decided that I'd like to join the OPP, but the OPP at that stage, you couldn't join unless you're 21. So instead, I applied to the Ottawa Police and got in 1977. And during my career, I had extensive work with the OPP. We worked collaboratively on a number of projects like Project Fiddler, which was later written about in a book called The Champagne Gang, High Times and Sweet Crimes by Jeremy Mercer. Inspector Patty McGuire led that from the OPP perspective. I led it from the Ottawa Police perspective. And after that was incident commander and did just a ton of work with the OPP and have an outstanding long-term relationship with the OPP and OPP members.
Well, thanks for all you've done and continue to do. And this book is quite inspiring. I managed to get a pre-copy of it, of your manuscript, and I gotta hand it to you, Lance. I had no idea what you were going through, what your family was going through, and it's definitely eye-opening and a very interesting read. And so before we talk more about kind of what we're here to talk about today, I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about your upbringing, because I know from reading the manuscript that AA calls this your family of origin. And AA, for those that aren't aware, is Alcoholics Anonymous. And can you please tell us about that and why that's important?
Yeah, it is very important, and I need to stress the fact that when you get into the program and you start going to counseling and going to meetings and all the kind of things that you do when you first get started, you start to explore this family of origin. But to be clear, what happened in my, I can't speak for others, but what happened in my childhood and upbringing, while it helped shape who I was, some of the good and some of the not so good, that's not an excuse for the behaviors that I talk about in the book and the kind of way that I treated my wife and my family. And so it's important to understand that it's not an excuse. But having said that, I grew up in a very, very religious family, and we would go to church every Sunday, and then on the way home, we would get the sermons that the priest didn't give us. We would get them from our mom, and it was a fantastic childhood. In the sense that, growing up in Iroquois, I could hop on my bike, go down to the golf course. I could go to the beach. You could go anywhere. That's back in the day when kids could just take off all day long. But at the same time, there were issues around the emotional stuff. And what I talk about in the book is how it eventually led me to be the kind of person, and maybe some of your listeners will relate to this, maybe they won't, but where I started to seek, I seeked people to, I didn't understand at the time, but look at me, I did this, look at me. Kind of interesting. And one of the people that read the manuscript said, isn't that funny that for a person that spent their whole life trying to get other people to like them or love them or acknowledge them, you write a book in order to get like, love, and acknowledgement. So it is kind of a weird.
It's thanks for sharing that with us, Lance. It's really interesting, the family of origin. It comes up quite often, and we really appreciate you sharing that. And I was just kind of very interested as well to see. It sounds like we had some similar experiences outside of family of origin that led us to careers in law enforcement. And I just wondered why you joined the Ottawa Police. Was that always your goal?
Well, as I said, Scott, originally I knew I wanted to be a police officer, and that came from a desire to service. I mean, the old, why do you want to be a police officer? Well, because I want to help people. Well, that was true, right? And pretty much all of my youthful jobs and experiences kind of led to that. So I did want to join the police, and eventually joined, like I said, in 1977, joined the Ottawa Police. But there's this something about service, and there's also something about, and I get into the book, and I'm even exploring it more today. If you think about what is your core value, what drives you to do what you do, and I've had a lot of time to think about this and to write about it. In my very center core is a need for justice for others, but also justice for me. And so, for example, if I'm in a situation where I think I'm being treated unfairly, and you would see this in my career where I would massively overreact. For example, one time I got a negative assessment from a boss, and I thought it was totally unfair, just totally unfair. I wrote I don't know how long it was, probably 8-page response to that negative assessment. Like, really? Like, really? So something inside of me when that happens, and when I saw injustice through my career, I did a lot of criminal investigations, a lot of kind of work on what we would today call human trafficking. It hurt me to the core. So that kind of, I guess, led to that career in policing.
We're going to dive a little bit deeper into that because of what we're talking about today. So when you talk about, a high stress environment such as law enforcement, obviously, how do you think that contributes to issues like addiction and mental health?
Well, there's no doubt that anyone involved in public safety, police, fire, paramedics, we all experience things. And in the book, I use the description, if you've ever watched A Christmas Carol by Dickens, when Marley comes back as a ghost and he's dragging these chains, right? That every incident that we go to during our careers that is traumatic in nature adds to those post-traumatic stress, what I call post-traumatic stress chains. And we don't know that we're building and building and building. So, for example, one of the most difficult situations that I ever faced, and I have to be very careful because the last thing I want to do is trigger this, but it was very early. I was only on the job for 10 days, and it involved a child, and it was very tragic. And as a result of that night, I went home, and the solution back then was to drink, right? I did call my father, who was a Second World War veteran, and I was probably drinking at the time, and basically said, Dad, this is what happened today. I don't know if I can do this. I was only on the job 10 days at that stage, 10 days. And he basically said, listen, son, you're going to be seeing stuff like that for the rest of your career. So you have a decision to make. If you don't think you can do it, then now's the time to leave. I stayed, but I can still, if I see the building where that happened, I could, every piece of that, every moment, every sound, every smell, everything. Right now, I'm telling you, I'm reliving it. And everybody that's on this podcast now listening to this has their own experiences. And I'm not trying to add to the stress that they have, but that's very, very harmful to us. And frankly, way back then, we didn't have, and I don't think the supports are anywhere near what they need to be yet, but we didn't have any supports back then.
Now, that's obviously a very personal experience, and thanks for sharing. Can you share some more, maybe personal experiences with how the challenges have manifested in their lives and what that's looked like for you?
Well, eventually what it started to do is I was what's called a binge drinker. So there are various, a lot of people think, frankly, that an alcoholic is the person that you see on the street. Like if you're in Ottawa, down on King Edward, they're an alcoholic. Right? Well, yes, they may be. But so are doctors, so are lawyers, multiple presidents of the United States, prime ministers of Canada. So people think about alcoholics in one way, but the reality is that the large majority of alcoholics are very high functioning, right? So I started to binge drink. And so when I drank, I can't understand people who have one drink. It is so foreign to me. The concept of having one drink, most healthy people, it's, whatever, have a glass of wine or a couple of glasses of wine and whatever. I could never do that. So when I drank to get drunk.
And now some people sort of have moments when it's their turning point and they realize that they need help. And how did you come to realize that you needed to get help with your addiction?
Well, it happened over time, and then there was a crisis. So the over time part was, when you wake up and you're going, oh my God, like what did I do last night? And, did I do this or did I do that? And then we had children, and, they would come into we had 3 beautiful boys, and, they would come in when they got a little bit older. They would come into the bedroom in the morning, and you'd been drinking the night before, and they'd kind of poke you in the eye and say, Dad, let's play. Right? So you're going, oh my God, you got a headache and you don't feel well. So all that, you start to question. And at least I started to question, like, is this the right thing? Am I doing this? So in fact, I stopped drinking for a year, and in 1995, and we went on a cruise with another couple, and I had 1 glass of wine, didn't even finish it because I didn't really do anything. But the following end of January, so this was 1996, my behavior had become just terrible. I was abusive verbally to my wife, yelling. My anger was just through the roof, and I couldn't understand what was going on. And that led to my wife. Fortunately, I now know, I didn't know then, but through a friend, she went to a group called Al-Anon. So that's kind of like the sister group to AA. And she started to get help. And eventually, she came to me near the end of January 1996 and said, that's it, no more, leave. We're not taking this shit anymore.
Now, would you say that that would be your turning point that led you to AA, Lance?
So what it did, just being very honest, is there's a kind of a not very funny joke about alcoholics. So, Emily, how can you tell if an alcoholic is lying?
I don't know.
If they move their lips. Mm-hmm. So when she first called me out on that, my response was, frankly, full of crap. I said, "Oh, yeah, okay, just give me a little time, and I'll work on this, and I'll get better." And again, this was after many of these discussions over a number of years, right, where it just kept on escalating and escalating and escalating. But I phoned the one program that we did have back then that was very helpful. Is I phoned the EAP program, and I went to see a local psychologist who was. I later found out was quite well known in this space, and I spent 50 minutes talking to him about everything, and I can't use the language that I use, but it was not very good, about how my wife doesn't understand me, and I'm doing all this for her. Doesn't she understand? I'm a staff sergeant of the Ottawa Police, and I'm in charge of the break and enter squad, and look at me, and look at me, and look at me, and look at me. And at the end of that 50 minutes, he said, "Okay, I'll come back again next week. I want you to go to AA because you're a dry drunk." I'm going, "What?" So I walked down the street back towards the police department, the police service, and I'm going, "Is this guy, did he not understand a word I said? I'm not the problem. She's the problem. What doesn't she understand about this? I'm doing all this for my family." So fortunately, one of my ex-partners, he had actually come out. He was the first person in the Ottawa Police to come out as an alcoholic, and he would actually come to training days and talk about AA and kind of his journey. And so he lived right around the corner from me. So I took the bus, went home, knocked on his door, said his name and said, "What's a dry drunk?" And he kind of smiled. Fast forward, he said, "Let's go to a meeting tonight." So I went to this meeting. It was in Orleans. I put on a hat, sunglasses. I didn't want to go, but I said, "Fine, whatever." And you, Emily, you've never seen so many losers in your life. The room was filled with losers, right? And I'm listening to this bullshit, all this crap. And it was I couldn't wait to get out of there. And at the end of that meeting, my friend gave me this little pamphlet with 20 questions on it. He said, "Take that home and fill it in." I said, "Well, give me one for Lise, and I'll fill it in, and I'll get her to fill it in, thinking about me." So we did that together, or on our own, and then came back together. And I think it was 15 or 16 yeses. And at the bottom of this pamphlet, it says words to the effect of, "If you answered yes to any one of these questions, you may have an issue with alcohol. 2, you probably have an issue with alcohol. 3 or more, you definitely have an issue with alcohol." And that's when the light went on. It was like, holy shit. Like, this is the first test I've passed since, like, high school. Like, wow. So the next day, I went to another meeting of AA. And I walked in that door, and you've never seen so many loving, kind, respectful, welcoming people in your life. And, of course, the people hadn't changed. Something inside of me had changed. And, And in AA, they have something called the chip, the chip system, where you get a chip for like 12 months, and you get a cake at 12 months, and 9 months, and 6 months, 3 months, and 1 month. And what they call the desire chip, which is a white chip, it's just your life has become unmanageable, and you just want it to change. And at that stage of my career, I'd been involved in some pretty hairy situations. I've never been so frightened in my life, walking up to take that chip. And that was on February 2nd, 1996.
Wow. Now, reflecting back on what you just said, would you say that, the therapist and your friend there, would you say that would be, some of the most instrumental people in your decision to get help? Or what did that boil down to?
Well, it was 100%. It was Lise. It was this friend of mine that was my partner. He became my sponsor, and he was like massive to this. He, go to meetings, and I'm a judgmental guy, right? And you would sit there at the beginning and you'd hear some guys talking about their journey. It's like, well, at least I'm not that. I didn't do that, and I didn't do that, and look at me, I'm a better drunk. And he quite quickly put the kibosh on that and said, no. Drunks, addicts, doesn't matter. We're all suffering. There's nobody better. There's nobody worse. The person that you see drunk on the street is no better than me or you. So frankly, every time I drive down Elgin Street or King Edward in Ottawa and I see someone suffering like that, I just say to myself, there, but for the grace of God, we're no better. So another huge opportunity that I had is he introduced us to a group in Ottawa called Serenity Renewal for Families. And there was a nun there, a little pixie of a nun. Her name was Sister Louise. She's now passed on. And she was phenomenal. And she would not take any bullshit from anybody. And so we'd go in there as a couple and I'd start spouting some crap and she'd just ignore me. And she'd talk to Lise. And she was fantastic. In fact, that led to the book has 3 charity partners, and one of those charity partners is Serenity Renewal for Families.
Well, that's a good segue, Lance, into kind of where we want to go next here. I would like to address kind of support systems. We often hear of so much support out there that it can get confusing or overwhelming for people as to where to turn for help. And I was just wondering for you, which organizations were the most supportive during your recovery? Obviously, you've said AA and the Serenity place. Can you maybe elaborate on that?
Yeah, at that stage, those were the 2 primary. And I went away to, I was fortunate to be able to go to I didn't think it was fortunate at the time, frankly, to Elliott Lake, to a place called Camilla's House. And it's quite well known in the community, at least when I went. There's almost an entire chapter of how when I went there, frankly, I didn't want to be there, and I was still fighting it. And there was a number of things that happened there, which were, if people decide to read the book, you can read about it. But this kind of really changed things for me, including finding a new God, which is a whole different topic for maybe another day. And so back then, that's what it was, and Lise was still in Al-Anon. Today, I think there's a lot more programs. 2 of the other programs that I've partnered with, or charities that I've partnered with, that we're going to be announcing very soon, is Badge of Life Canada, which was a program that was actually started by Ottawa police officers, and the Canada Beyond the Blue, which does a phenomenal job with family members.
That's very honorable of you. I understand, like, any proceeds of any of these books that you're donating to those organizations. Am I correct on that?
Yeah, it's the majority. So I kind of talked to 3 groups, and they said, listen, you should probably keep some of that because I am trying to write a second book. So although the reality is, and I've made it very clear, we have an MOU between myself and the 3 groups. The reality is, selling books, most people probably don't realize this. You don't really make money selling books. At least most people don't. But having said that, I'm also including that any speaking opportunities, and I've had a few of those already where sometimes you can get an honorarium, and so the majority are basically 20% per charity. So 60% of any profit will go to them. And, we'll talk maybe a little bit later on if people might not want to buy the book, but, maybe you could support those organizations just with direct donations.
Well, thanks, Lance. I'm always interested to hear how your employer reacted to your situation. And were there any specific kind of mechanisms that were brought to your attention for police officers like yourself? I know Peter Platt, he's talked about this several times. He's now died, but Peter Platt was the guy that founded Badge of Life Canada. I was wondering if you could just elaborate on kind of the mechanisms in place for police officers at the time and how that's kind of evolved.
So, just if you'll recall, the name of the book is called If They Only Knew. Well, they didn't know. I didn't tell them. I didn't tell anybody. I couldn't take that risk. When this first started, I was a staff sergeant, later became an inspector. I was doing work across the country, blah, 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 blah. No way in hell I was telling anybody this. This was a huge secret. I did go to open AA meetings. Frankly, there was a number of my bosses that I didn't know they were in the program. You go in and, oh, there's so-and-so, and there's so-and-so, and so it was kind of a loosely held secret, but I did not tell anyone. And that's a real tragedy, really. And quite honestly, for OPPA members and other association members, it's still a challenge, right? So what happens if I go and tell people that I have these challenges? I've also had multiple health-related concerns, for example, cancer, a couple of times. And even today, yesterday was Bell Let's Talk Day, which is great. And I think we can be far more open about issues around mental health. But from my experience, if I tell people that, certainly back then, that, hey, I had cancer, it's, oh my goodness, are you okay? But if you tell people, I've had this happen many times, listen, just so you know, I can't have that drink. I rarely would do that. Back then, I never did it, but today, and there's still this, oh, you're drunk. Like, what the hell's wrong with you? Just get over yourself, buddy. Like, that still happens today. So, unfortunately, addiction, it's still not quite where it needs to be. Moving forward, I think there are fantastic programs. Again, I think we could do better. I think senior officers and the police services themselves absolutely need to do better. I think the associations do a good job, but there's probably more that can be done there. I know the OPPA has some great programs. I've talked to some of the leaders of OPPA about some of the programs that you have. So ultimately, the most important thing to me is, and what I kind of stress in the book, is if you start to think you've got an issue, whether it's mental health or addiction or whatever, find a way to reach out to someone and to talk and to get help. Because going to AA alone, for me, it was great, but it would not have got me to where I am today and our family to where we are today without, very serious professional help, counseling, etc.
Now, I wanted to get in, to your personal recovery process. You mentioned before that, your life had become unmanageable and, started to go to AA. And I'm just curious, did things sort of begin to improve rapidly, or was it over quite some time? Like, when did you feel like you were starting to get a hold of things?
To a certain degree, Emily, they started to improve a little bit. Lise said, okay, as long as you keep on going to these meetings and going to counseling, then you don't have to leave the house. But I'm not taking this bullshit anymore. Like you raising your voice and yelling and screaming and all the emotional abuse that I was putting her through. No, that's over. We're not doing that shit anymore. So, and good for her that she had the strength and courage and frankly the support from Al-Anon to do that. But the real answer was it took years, and I'm far from perfect today. I just this week came to realize that one of the conditions that I've never been diagnosed with ADHD, but there's no doubt in my mind that I've had it. I had serious issues at school. I barely graduated from high school. I'm talking my average when I graduated from grade 13 back in the day in Seaway District High School was 52%. 52%, right? You got to work hard to get 52% on average, right? So I now realize just this week that I have a terrible habit. I'm not doing it here because of the structure of this, but anybody that knows me knows that I can't wait. I jump in conversations. It's just come to my attention that is a symptom of ADHD. And so I've had to kind of learn. So I'm 7 years old and I'm still trying to get better. So the correct answer is it takes time.
Yeah. And now, we've touched upon both alcohol abuse and mental health. And, can you talk to us a little bit more about the journey between the two and sort of finding the balance and getting the help you needed between the two of them intrinsically?
They are, I don't know what the right word would be, but they're entangled dramatically, right? They go hand in hand. Most people don't realize that alcoholism is listed in the same big mental health book as PTSD, right? It is a mental health issue, right? And disease. And most people kind of scoff at that, but it is. And so they are tied directly to depression. They are tied directly to a wide range of these issues. So the book actually starts with me talking about an incident where I was sitting on the stairs holding my gun ready to kill myself. That's the first thing. If anybody buys the book, the first thing you're going to read is that story. And it's not easy to write about that. And it certainly was hard to go through. I'm very lucky that Lise came down the stairs, sat beside me, and talked to me, and I'm obviously still here. So depression, there's all sorts of things that ties to this. And so fortunately, through time, today, do I still get depressed? Yes, to a degree, but they're more like ups and downs, like everybody has. The massive swings that I used to have, I used to just literally shut down for days, just totally shut down. So fortunately, I don't suffer from that anymore, but it doesn't mean it couldn't happen again. So I need to continue to work on it.
And in the same vein of recovery that you're talking about, obviously there's a lot of rebuilding to do in your life with relationships. And how did you go about doing that as you began to improve?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So one of my favorite authors, and I quote him quite a bit in my book, is Stephen Covey. And I highly recommend people read his book called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And they're not really habits, they're principles. Right. And in there, he kind of talks about these principles, like, beginning with the end in mind, etc. He's a wonderful storyteller, just a wonderful, wonderful book. And one of the stories he talks about in there, the analogies that he uses or the metaphors that he uses, is the emotional bank account. So when Lise told me to leave, she was beyond. If you think of, I had been making withdrawals from our couple emotional bank account for years. Withdrawal. The odd time, let's go on this little trip, or let's do this little nice thing. There's a little bit of a deposit, but we were so far in overdraft, it's like you couldn't see black, right? So it took a long time for her and our family to kind of begin to trust me again, that I wasn't going to be person that I was. Not to say that, things, again, as I said before, things didn't get resolved right away. I still flew off the handle from time to time. I still needed to work on these things, but it takes time. So repairing that, it's really about continually trying to make these deposits in these emotional bank accounts so that you finally get to the point where if you have a bad day and maybe you raise your voice a little bit, or you get frustrated, you do whatever. That's a withdrawal, but you're in a nice kind of a positive place now, so you can the relationships can withstand those, because we all have those days, right? Nobody's perfect.
And now here we are, present time. So what does life look like for you now? And does it ever cross your mind? Do you ever foresee a day when you would have a drink again?
So I'm going to give away the ending of the story in the book. Probably not a good thing for somebody who's trying to sell some books, but it's a really, really good ending. In fact, when you see the cover of the book, and I just got to see the draft covers 2 days ago, the cover of the book is a photo that I took at Hanakalea in Hawaii, which is in Maui. So for our 25th anniversary, we spent 2 months going across the South Pacific and ended up in Hawaii. And this Hanakalea, it's a wonderful experience if anybody ever has a chance to go to Maui. And so you get up very early in the morning. They tell you to dress warm. You go up to the top of this mountain, and it's a sunrise. Everybody's super quiet, and it's a very emotional, very spiritual, if you choose to make it that way, experience. So the photo is of that sunrise, and it metaphorically, it kind of stands for, we went through the valleys of despair. We went through some very, very, very terrible times, and we kind of made it through. Life today is friggin' phenomenal. We have 3 beautiful grandsons. We still travel. Yeah, life is very good. Again, is it perfect? No. The odd time do I kind of have a bit of a misstep or whatever? For sure, right? But overall, wow. And this is not an overstatement. Had Lise not done what she did, gone and got the help, and to the family members of OPPA members, if you're listening to this podcast, don't rely on the member to just get help. Go get your own help. Ideally, you do it together. But if they're not ready, just go get your own help. Reach out to some of these groups. So I would not be alive today, literally, if it wasn't for Lise getting the help that she got and then getting the strength and courage to say, no, enough of this bullshit.
It's really good information, good advice, Lance. I know Emily kind of alluded to it there. Are you ever going to have a drink or two again?
No, never. I can't. In reality, let's, for argument's sake, I say, okay, yeah, I could have a drink. I would be risking. I just said how fantastic my life is today. It's unbelievable. Is one drink worth it? Not even frigging close. I'll have my water or my sparkling water, or I can't do the Coke evermore because I put on so much frigging weight because I switched out of the sugar and alcohol to sugar and Coke, so I kind of stay away from that. But no, I can't. Could I? I suppose. Is it worth it? Not even close.
Well, switching gears once again here to the book itself and the writing process, Lance. Why did you decide to write a book about your journey? What were your goals in wanting to do this?
The original goal was for myself as a kind of a form of therapy, and the secondary goal was as a kind of a cautionary tale for our sons, and as another apology to my wife and to our three boys. So I actually wrote it 4 years ago. I had stopped doing the big time consulting that I was doing, and I was trying to get back in shape. I was training for a half Ironman, and I said, this is something I want to do. So I wrote the book. It took 3 months. I got up every morning for an hour and a half, sat on the same chair. I wouldn't work any longer than an hour and a half, and then I would go and train and spend time with Lise and do whatever. And then I share with them as a part of that as a part of seeking their forgiveness. And they all said, listen, Dad, we've already forgiven you for years, so you don't need to do that, but sure, we'll read the book. Then it sat there, didn't do anything with it. And I was invited to speak at a conference down east in New Brunswick. It was a kind of a interoperability related thing. It's called RADCOM. And so there was, 150 people or so in the room. But the organizer, who I know, he wanted me to talk about interoperability. And I said, listen, what would you think, instead of me doing that, what would you think about me talking about this, basically the two books? One is kind of like the kind of what's next is kind of helping people with developing their own personal value statement. And then the second half would be talking about this journey. And he said, yeah, that'd be great. So that's what I did. And the feedback, pretty much universal from people that were in the room that came up and chatted with me or sent me a message, whatever after, was, please publish your book. It will help people. So that was, in the fall of 2023. And so I started, and editing and then eventually got connected to an actual professional editor. And a year later, and literally over 10,000 changes to the book. Like, it's just mind-boggling. And, that's a comma here and a colon there and a whatever, but we're very close to being ready to publish.
Oh, we look forward to that book being out there, Lance. I think you are going to help a lot of people. I got another question about the writing process and what it was like for you. Were there any particular challenges or moments of catharsis?
Yeah, the beginning of the book was easy. The end of the book was easy. The middle of the book, where things really went south, and trying to remember and talking to Lise about, that time on the stairs and other terrible things that I did. I mean, that's not fun to think about. It's not fun to write about. It's certainly not fun to talk to your partner and your wife about. But it also, I think, helped to bring some additional closure and some really good discussions between Lisa and I. And I tell you, there was a lot of discussions between Lisa and I about, should we actually publish this book? Because it's one thing for me to write a book and talk about me. Well, she's in there too, and our kids are in there, right? So, her family is going to read this, and others that she has a million friends, and they're going to read this. So is this something we really want to do? And ultimately, after lots of discernment and lots of conversations and chatting, and we came to the point where we said, listen, if this can help people, and in AA, the 12th step is all about giving back and helping. So at this stage, like I say, I'm getting close to 7 years old. If this book can help some people and maybe they can avoid some of the bullshit crap that I put my wife and family through, and if they can go get help, or if somebody, like I said, a family member hears this and says, I think something's wrong with dad or with mom, or, go get help on your own, right? Because, I use the analogy of as a lifeguard. I was a lifeguard for a number of years, and one of the first things you learn as a lifeguard is if someone's drowning, you just don't kind of swim out there and let them grab you, because you're going to drown too. So as a lifeguard, you learn to go out, you're going to offer help, but you're going to stay safe, right? So in AA, there's something called HALT, hungry, angry, lonely, tired. So I need to look after myself every day. And if I'm not looking after myself, it sounds very selfish, and they call it the selfish disease. If I'm not looking after myself every day, I can't be a loving husband and a loving father and a caring grandfather to 3 children under 3 years old, right? So, it was very cathartic, but it's part of a process, a long-term process. But I'm glad I did it now, and I've learned a lot.
Lance, I understand a lot from talking to you, actually, that writing a book and having it published are 2 very different processes. And can you tell us about that and any key lessons that you learned during the past year?
Yeah, for sure. And, for the members, if anybody, I'm on LinkedIn, and I think we'll talk about that later, but if anybody ever wants to thinking about doing this, I'm happy to kind of connect and chat about that. But, writing a book is relatively easy. It's just kind of sit down and write. Getting it published is an entirely different thing. And getting it published to a big name publisher, that's almost impossible today. But, today you can publish on Amazon fairly easily. But there's a difference in my mind between just kind of writing something and throwing it up on Amazon or doing a really good job and getting it out there. So, yeah, that process, I certainly recommend working with an independent editor or others, because you can only review your own book so many times, right? And I think I've had something like, I think it's 60 what they call ARC or advanced reader copy reviews. Most of those people were just they're not looking at grammar, but they're looking at substantive correction. So, for example, in the book I talk about post retirement, I had what I in the book talked about, a very serious anxiety attack. I've had 3 different clinical psychologists and a professor of psychology read the book to make sure I'm not saying things incorrectly. And 2 of them said, listen, Lance, what you experienced there, that was not an anxiety attack. You do sometimes have those. That was a panic attack. I literally, when that was happening, again, this is just, this is after I retired, right? I thought to myself that day I was going crazy. And if the cops came, which would have been OPP, frankly, because I was in Rockland at the time, I was going to fight them. Anybody came in, there's no way you're going to take me. You're not taking me. Blah, 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 blah. I was like, it was nuts, just nuts. So, and that's probably not a very politically correct term, but that's what I thought at the time. So, all that to say that, it's not an easy process, but I'm absolutely enjoying it. And I've already started, like we've already said, I've already started the second book, which is going to be way more fun to write and to read, because it's really around helping people with their decisions around, should I take this promotion or that promotion, or should I take this transfer, or when I'm retiring, what do I really want to do? So that one's going to be a lot more fun. And I've already kind of scoped out the third book, which will be a really fun murder mystery taking place in Ottawa. So yeah, I'm enjoying it.
Nice. That's excellent. So just reminding our listeners that today is January 23rd, 2025, that we're recording. And as you mentioned, the publishing process is still ongoing. Do you have a date when you expect the book to be published? And I also understand that you had an important step in the publishing process this very week. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so originally we were hoping to make actually an announcement next week, but then due to some family-related things with one of our editorial team members, we've had to kind of push that off a little bit. So right now we're looking at doing a major announcement about our partnerships with Badge of Life Canada, Canada Beyond the Blue, and Serenity Renewal for Families in Ottawa. We're hoping to do that on the 18th of March with pre-orders being available. And then the full book launch on April the 8th. So, and then this week, the big thing that happened was, as I just kind of alluded to a few minutes ago, is we got the first images of the cover. I had wanted to use this picture that I talked about from Hanakalea, but I'm not a graphic designer, so I didn't know if that was going to work or not. So the graphic designer, the person that's designing the cover, came back with a number of options to look at, and my wife and our kids and their partners have looked at it, and we're all kind of agreed on two kind of to work on, but they all include that photo, which to me is I hope very inspiring for people, that they can see themselves there, that at some stage, even it doesn't matter how bad things are today, that with time and with help, professional help, it's just amazing the difference in your life that comes from that.
Well, thanks for that, Lance. And I'm just curious, if people want to purchase a book or they want to, support the charities that you had mentioned, did you just want to circle back on that to reiterate?
Yeah, thanks very much, Emily. So, we're not 100% sure what the book cost is going to be. It's probably going to be around $20. But if people aren't interested in the book or don't want to buy the book or don't like reading books or like reading these kinds of books, then I would ask, please just make a donation directly to one of those three charities. Again, Badge of Life Canada, Canada Beyond the Blue, or Serenity Renewal for Families in Ottawa. And, maybe you could just put in there, if they only knew, in that kind of like in the comments, so that they can track that this is helping to kind of generate some money. And I would certainly appreciate it. And then for anybody that's interested in knowing more, they can go to lancevalcour.com. That would be greatly appreciated.
Well, thank you, Lance. You've been very vulnerable here on this podcast. I am sure that a number of people listening to this will resonate in some way with them, and maybe even get somebody to step up and do what you've done. So, congratulations for writing this and being persevere through the process, and thanks also to your family. Like they obviously are supporting you, so thank you to them, and we wish you all the best with your book launch and your ongoing journeys. And just want to remind everybody that Lance has a website out there, lancevalcour.com. And the book is called If They Only Knew, A Cop's Journey with Addiction and Mental Health. And Lance is also on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram. And he sure would appreciate a follow and support on those channels. So.
And if anybody's listening, just check the show notes and we'll make sure that the links are there for easy access to find Lance. So thank you again. I'll echo what Scott said to you, Lance. Good luck with your publishing. I'm positive it's going to make a difference for others. And as Scott said, please pass along our appreciation to Lise and your family as well.
I'll do that. And again, thank you both. I truly appreciate the opportunity to chat with you today.
You have been listening to retired Ottawa Police Inspector Lance Valcour talking about his upcoming book, If They Only Knew, A Cop's Journey with Addiction and Mental Health. If you like what you hear, please hit subscribe on the podcast platform of your choice so you never miss an episode. If you have any questions for Lance or any ideas for future episodes, please email us at communications@oppa.ca. Until next time, thanks for listening and stay safe.